Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
104.7 The Cave. Mike the Intern in the studio this morning with Jay Stevens. It's Dark Side of the Stream, our 60th episode.
We should have brought a cake or something.
We made it.
Not that we eat cake, but...
I actually wanted to talk to you about this before we got into this. We're going to come up with a new jingle. And you know how like the Ghostbusters commercial, like in the movie, they're like, we believe you.
Yeah. We want to believe you.
We're going to do the same thing. And it's going to be like, we watch documentaries so you don't have to.
We do save people a lot of time.
This is Dark Side of the Stream, also known as your Cliff Notes for all the documentaries. If you got a guy coming into the office, hey man, did you see this movie? You don't have to watch it. You just listen to us and we'll watch it for you. That's what we do here.
We're cheating the system for you.
This week was my pick, and the reason, there's many reasons why I picked this, but the biggest reason was that Frank Zappa doesn't really get played on the radio, and I am a big fan of Frank Zappa. A lot of his stuff anyway. There's a ton to go through, but this was a chance for me to talk about Frank Zappa for an hour. I took that chance, and we are going to discuss the documentary film Zappa on Hulu. Jay, what did you think about the documentary?
This was an interesting one. Took me 3 attempts to try to watch this thing because it was terrible. And I was cursing your name out.
Whoa. What do you mean by terrible? What do you mean by terrible?
Can I finish my statement,
What do you mean by terrible? Before you go any further, what do you mean by terrible? Was it too long?
It was weird. The dude's music is out there, like whacked out. It was slow. I was like, first hour and a half, I was cursing your name out. And then the final home stretch, it was okay. I get it. And I was thanking you for making me sit through this. I learned something. I learned that he's way more than just some dude that plays weird music. He's actually like this crazy modern day composer.
He's a virtuoso composer. As far as modern day composition goes, Frank Zappa is all about that. The dude.
Weird music, though. I'll still say that. I mean, weird music.
That's the thing about Frank Zappa, is that you have so many different versions of Frank Zappa. You've got the funny, don't eat the yellow snow Frank Zappa, the parody Frank Zappa, the satirical Frank Zappa. Then you've got just the guitar virtuoso Frank Zappa. I mean, that dude could have been in any band doing whatever he wanted to do. We'll get to that a little bit later. Then you've got the compositions that he would write. Then you've got like the jazz fusion Frank Zappa, which is what I was into. There is so many different things that he did.
And I think the part that perked up for me was the Valley Girl, because I remember the Valley Girl song very strongly. I was living in Southern California at the time.
And that was one of his parody.
And that was his only mainstream.
Well, one of. Don't eat the yellow snow. I mean, it just depends on, it just depends on what you, like, I remember.
And I was familiar with him because I was a big Steve Vai fan when I was a guitar player in high school, and Steve Vai came from Zappa's tribe or whatever.
What did you learn? What was the most important thing you think you learned about Frank Zappa when you watched this documentary?
That he was an actual, modern day composer, modern day Beethoven or Mozart.
Absolutely.
And all just self-trained and just in his head. He just hears it in his head.
Kind of like Paul McCartney.
Deep.
I mean, Zappa did know how to read and write music and stuff like that.
Though, I think,
but
right?
self-taught, very much self-taught. And he had some very interesting things that happened to him in his life, his childhood and all that stuff. And the great thing about this documentary is that it actually has archival footage. The Zappa family were all on board. They gave him, this dude, you want to talk about, we did a documentary about someone who just recorded everything. I can't remember what episode that was about.
Kilmer.
Yeah. The Val documentary. in like just behind the scenes stuff when they were shooting Top Gun and stuff. Zappa was the same way. He filmed everything. He recorded everything. There are just troves of unreleased music, unfinished ideas.
Yeah,
he was constantly making stuff.
27 albums or something he recorded, and then after he died they released 53 more albums.
They've probably got
100
more
albums,
unrealized stuff, notes, sketches. It's a lot to dive into, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Dark Side of the Stream, discussing Zappa on 104.7 The Cave. 104.7 The Cave. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens back in the studio. Dark Side of the Stream today, discussing Zappa. Well, I am glad to hear that you enjoyed it. I'm glad that even after your third try, and you stuck to
weird.
I kept
really
pushing
weird.
him and saying, "Come on, watch this thing. We got to do this thing, man."
I
finally did it.
I backburnered it, man. I played video game instead one night. It's like backburnered it. Just
But you did.
I did it, and I was happy that I did. I learned something.
That's good. I'm glad you did. Because I know you're not the biggest progressive music fan.
Yeah, the music was really, really out there.
It was a great Lou Whitney who said, in if you're a musician in town, you know Lou. He used to say that song's got more pieces in it than a Happy Meal. Which, when it comes to Frank Zappa's music,
a lot of notes.
Nothing could be more true. Oh, it's just unbelievable. Yeah. Oh my God! And even in the satirical songs, it would be there. And back to what you're saying about Steve Vai. At a certain point in his writing career, Frank Zappa was writing stuff that was so complex that he literally had to hire other guys to come in and play it. Because for him, he didn't feel like he could pull it off. Enter Steve Vai, a very young Steve Vai. And I got to do an interview with Steve a couple of years ago about this. And of course, I brought up Frank Zappa, and he had some just incredible stories to talk about him and how kind he was and just how beyond normal thinking he was. He was wired completely different than most people.
Yeah, and he said one really interesting line in there when he talked about Frank Zappa, being perfectionist and pushing people. And he says he would write a part and not to make it too hard for you, but because he believed that you could do it. He believed that you could push yourself to get to that.
Because he pushed himself like that.
Wow, man.
Well,
crazy.
and that's also part of his greatness. I'm glad you brought that up because, a lot of times when we get disappointed as people, it's because we have expectations for ourselves, and that creates expectations for others. It's a hard lesson to learn that just because you do something this way, you expect someone else to do it that way. That's just, you'll get disappointed every time. But Zappa's strength was that he could convince you that you could do that because he was that way. And when you're around him, you would a lot of the times pull it off. I mean, the other thing about this documentary that I loved was look how many different people he touched. Look how many people were in this documentary. I mean, some of it was archival footage, but you had
members.
Beatles. You had Hendrix. You had some of the Stones. You had Bowie. You had
everybody wanted to hang out with.
It was literally everyone. And at a certain point, there is something that does exist of Pink Floyd and Zappa jamming together. Which one day I will have a copy of that.
Really out there.
You know that I want that in my collection. But yeah, it's an incredible documentary, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that I learned. Dark Side of the Stream next on 104.7 The Cave. 104.7 The Cave. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens back in the studio. It's Dark Side of the Stream discussing Zappa on Hulu. Now we went back to what Jay learned. Now it's my turn. Dweezil. Zappa's kid. I did not know. I knew Dweezil because he's kind of the one that pushes on his.
He was a guitar shredder too.
He's an amazing musician. If you ever get a chance to see, he does a lot of stuff where he'll do anniversary tours for his dad and music in his own right. He's been on the Experience Hendrix tour. He's a great guitar player. But the name Dweezil actually, and I did not know this, came from what Zappa would call his wife's weirdly shaped toe, Dweezil, and that's where they got the name Dweezil from.
Yeah, he liked the weird kid names.
Dude,
he liked the weird kid names.
Something else, and I already knew this, but the drugs thing, a lot of times people feel like they have to use drugs to aid them in their creative process. Zappa was hugely opposed to the use of drugs.
Which is crazy because you would think this music,
he was taking everything.
You were out of your mind writing
Nope,
this stuff.
He didn't want. Yeah. He didn't take it. He was very against anyone in his band taking drugs. But then again, he was also very, very, very opposed to the government's war on drugs. He thought it was hypocritical of them to do that. Obviously, when the censorship thing came up in the 80s.
Yeah, that was an interesting part.
Hugely vocal about that.
They weren't trying to censor his music, but he took it upon himself to stand up and speak. And he even says in there, they were coming at Prince. He's not over here talking. They're coming at the boss, Bruce Springsteen. He's not over here talking. They're coming at Michael Jackson. None of them were saying anything. He felt, okay, well, then I have to say something.
Because he had been doing this for so long and he understood.
It wasn't about the money or commercials.
No.
he would dump everything back in, and I don't think he had a lot of money, it seemed like.
It's kind of like bands around here. You're
Fighting
always
with
funneling
labels.
it back into the machine to keep it
Fighting
going.
with labels,
Yeah.
doing it yourself, selling records out of your warehouse.
He did leave a good, big enough legacy, though, for his family that even all these years, the music and the releases they've had, I'm sure they're doing just fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, he definitely wanted to bring it back into the fold. And again, if you're a big fan of music and you're not really too familiar with Frank Zappa, this is a great documentary to get you in and just kind of understand.
This is the gateway drug?
This is the gateway drug. And hopefully, after watching this, Jay, you might actually pick up a Zappa record and listen to it.
Well, the interesting thing, I probably won't do that. The interesting thing, though, is guaranteed my uncle and my parents probably listened to some of this when they were stoned, because I remember some of these Frank Zappa tunes that they'd play little parts of. But if Steve Vai's early solo stuff is very Zappa-ish.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Little Green Men and stuff like that, very weird.
Very progressive.
Like I would buy it because of the guitar shredding part, but it was weird stuff too, you know?
The other things that was just crazy is all the crap that happened to him, like live shows, like they were playing, the Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water story, like that actually happened. There was a fan that shot off a flare gun at a show and almost caused the band and Zappa to be
And
burned
some guy
alive.
tackled him off stage.
And then about a
put him in a
week
wheelchair
after
for a
that, he's
while.
playing a show and he gets tackled and
Rock and roll's dangerous.
he falls off stage, crushes his larynx, and his voice drops like a third. So he you know how we always say, at least according to Dio, you got to bleed for the dancer. Frank Zappa definitely bled for the dancer. This is Dark Side of the Stream discussing Zappa. We'll be back next to give it our I guess review. Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave. 104.7 The Cave. Mike the Intern back in the studio one more time on this Thursday morning to discuss Zappa on Hulu. This is Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
So how many weird modulated notes are you going to give us?
I would say, how many Peaches in Regala would you give this documentary?
Regala?
That's one of his songs. It's probably one of my favorites.
It's over my head, that one.
I'm more of the jazz fusion.
How many extra notes would you give this song?
How many Peaches? I would give this
pages
definitely a
of
strong 4. Strong 4 Peaches.
I'll go a little less than that, just because it was weird and slow, and the payoff was very slight, and the payoff came at the end barely.
Barely for you, but it did pay off. And you would
For
say
me,
that
because
this,
I did
this
learn
was
something
worth your
about
time?
Frank Zappa, and I
Okay.
learned he wasn't just a guy that wrote weird music. He was actually like this brilliant, amazing,
Extremely
composer,
brilliant.
modern day composer
Extremely brilliant.
in a lost art form. Really,
In his
you know?
lifetime, he released 62 albums. And like you said,
And after he died-
passed 57 albums, making it a total of 119 albums
that's
released.
a task right there. So I will. I'll give it a 2.5.
2.5.
Could be my lowest rating I've ever.
Wow. Okay, I completely disagree. Now, if you were just listening to this and you want me to point you in the direction of some records to listen to, let me do that. Hot Rats, great place to start when listening to Frank Zappa. The Grand Wazoo also is a great album. And if you want some of his great guitar work, Zootalourus is really a great album to start with. When I was a kid and we first moved to Springfield, I have a great memory of me and my brother playing Zelda Link to the Past in my bedroom and listening to Zootalourus on repeat. We still talk about that album to this day. And it's a great memory. It's just that kind of weird position I was in my teens.
A little deep for me.
You imagine me being 14 years old and jamming out to Frank Zappa? Well, that's exactly what happened.
Now the 14-year-old Jay would take LSD and listen to Judas Priest in the dark.
I would just listen to
The
Zappa.
Ripper.
The Ripper. All right, so I guess
My turn?
it's Jay's turn for some payback. What are we listening? What are
We're
we
watching on Netflix Monsters Inside the Many Faces of some guys.
Can't even remember the name.
Monsters Inside. It's about a guy with 24 multiple personalities.
Okay. All right.
And this documentary, just to make you want to watch it if it doesn't sound interesting, it goes, whoa, this is crazy. Okay, gosh, that was wild. No, come on. Whoa. And then, okay, we're good now. No, it's going crazier even. Yeah, it's got
To the
levels.
moon.
Levels to the moon. It's going to blow your mind.
All
It's
right.
going to blow your mind.
Monsters Inside, Netflix. That is the next documentary we're watching. Dark Side of the Stream. As always, you can download these as a podcast on our 104.7 The Cave app. Watch us do it live every Thursday at 9 a.m.
You can find us on Grindr.
Or you can find Jay on Grindr. This has been Dark Side of the Stream.
Both of us, not just me.
On 104. Both of us. Sometimes.
2 for 1.
We're together like
2
this.
for 1.
This is our
Grindr
picture.
profile picture right here.
Take your pick. It's Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.